digging into some source material that honestly presents a really surprising view on heart disease.
Yeah, it's pretty different.
We've got this YouTube video, features insights from Dr. Berg, he's a chiropractor, and he's talking with his friend, Dr. Philip Ovadia, who's actually a practicing heart surgeon.
Right.
And our mission really is to unpack their claim about the #1 cause of heart disease. It's based on what Dr. Ovadia apparently sees, right there on the operating table.
And Dr. Berg's nutritional perspective ties into that.
Exactly.
And look, you might think you already know the big cause is cholesterol, right?
Yeah.
Blood pressure, smoking, maybe.
That's usual suspect.
Yeah, but this source, it kind of goes in a totally different direction right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
The core idea they're putting out there, it points to something really specific, a certain kind of fat that's like wrapped right around your heart.
Okay, let's start right there then, with what the surgeon is seeing. Dr. Ovadia says that pretty much every single time, he says almost 100% during open heart surgeries, he sees this specific type of visceral fat just sitting directly on the heart, around it.
Directly on it. And what makes this fat, they call it epicardial fat, scientifically, what makes it so dangerous, according to them, is that it's in direct contact.
Touching the heart muscle itself.
Yeah, and the coronary arteries, too. So just think about that. Any inflammation coming from that fat, it doesn't need to travel through your blood from, somewhere else.
It's right there.
It's right there. It hits the heart first. Bam. Immediate contact.
Wow. Okay, so this problem fat is literally like hugging the heart. The big question then, and this seems to be the engine driving their whole argument, what makes this specific fat build up there?
And their answer is really clear, very consistent throughout the source. High insulin.
High insulin. Okay, tell us a bit more about how they connect those dots.
Well, the basic process they describe is, when your insulin levels are high, it's like a signal to your body, store fat.
Right, store fat mode.
Exactly. And yeah, it stores fat all over, but it seems to really like storing it around your organs. That's visceral fat, and notably around the liver, too. That can lead to fatty liver disease. But here's the flip side they emphasize. If you keep your insulin levels low, the body does the opposite. It starts burning fat for energy.
Okay.
And crucially, they claim this low insulin state is key. It helps your body actually shrink that dangerous layer of fat around the heart.
So it's not just about overall body fat. It's about this specific fat driven by insulin levels. And usually when insulin is high all the time, that points to something deeper, right? Insulin resistance.
Precisely. Insulin resistance is like the hidden engine humming away underneath all this. You can think of your cells having these little locks, receptors, right? Insulin is the key. It's supposed to unlock the cells so glucose can get out of the blood and inside for energy.
But with resistance.
The locks are jammed.
Yeah.
Or rusty. The cells just aren't listening to the insulin properly.
So your body, trying to get the message through, just pumps out more and more insulin.
That's exactly it. So you end up with these chronically high insulin levels, but the insulin isn't really doing its job efficiently at the cell level.
And those high levels just keep telling the body, store fat, store fat.
Yep. Especially in those problematic visceral spots, including, according to this source, that epicardial fat right around the heart.
That's a really interesting angle. It shifts the focus away from just, lose weight generally to why someone might be gaining weight, and specifically where that fat is ending up, linking it straight back to your metabolic state.
It really does. And the source actually gives some practical signs, ways you might be able to spot if you could potentially be dealing with insulin resistance. They list 7 things, almost like little clues your body might be giving you.
Okay, clues. What's the first one?
First one's pretty straightforward, something many people can check easily. Waist size. For men, they say if your waist is over 40 inches.
And for women?
Over 35 inches. Because that fat around your middle, that abdominal fat, it's not just, surface fluff. It's strongly linked to that deeper, nastier, visceral fat around the organs.
Makes sense. What else?
Another physical sign they mention, skin tags, those little growths.
Okay.
And also darkened, sometimes kind of thickened skin pigment, usually in folds, like under the armpits or maybe in the groin area. It's called acanthosis nigricans.
Right, I've heard of that. What about blood tests? Any clues there?
Yep, and they mentioned blood work. High triglycerides, for one.
Okay, triglycerides are a type of fat in the blood, right?
Exactly. Your body uses them for energy, but high levels aren't good. And paired with that, they say low HDL cholesterol. That's the one people often call the good cholesterol.
Because it helps clear out the arteries.
Yeah, it helps remove cholesterol, so having lower levels means you've got less of that protective action going on. That's another flag for them.
Okay, what else is on the list?
Difficulty losing weight. If you feel like you're really trying, making an effort, but the scale just won't budge consistently,
Hmm.
the source suggests maybe insulin resistance is part of why your body's kind of stuck in fat storage mode.
That can be really frustrating for people.
Totally. And the last one they list, it's about hunger and fasting. If you find it really, really hard to go very long without eating, like skipping a meal feels almost impossible, or trying any kind of fasting is just agony,
Yeah.
and you're constantly thinking about food, craving things, they suggest that's another clue. It might mean your body isn't switching smoothly between burning glucose and burning stored fat for fuel, which again points back to potential insulin resistance.
Huh. So that's 7 things: waist size, skin tags, darkened skin, triglycerides, HDL, trouble losing weight, and difficulty fasting or constant hunger. It gives you a pretty concrete checklist to think about beyond just stepping on a scale.
Exactly. It's trying to get at the potential underlying
Yeah.
metabolic situation.
Okay, so we've got the problem that fat around the heart, the epicardial fat. We've linked it, according to the source, to high insulin and insulin resistance. And we have these clues to look out for. Now, what did the source say actually causes the insulin resistance itself? They do start with some familiar culprits, right?
Oh, yeah. They definitely list the things most people already associate with.
Right.
Blood sugar spikes and insulin problems, refined carbs and starches are right up there.
Like potatoes, pasta.
Bread, cereal, crackers, all that stuff that breaks down into glucose pretty fast in your body.
And they specifically highlighted one type of sugar?
They did, yeah. They singled out fructose, said it was at the top of the list for driving this whole insulin resistance issue.
Interesting. But it wasn't just about food, was it?
No, definitely not. They also bring in stress. Chronic stress, they say, is a really significant factor in messing up your metabolism.
And sleep, too.
Absolutely. Chronic sleep issues, not getting enough sleep or poor quality sleep, maybe sleep apnea, that kind of thing. And they make a connection there too. They point out that being stressed or sleep deprived can actually make you crave the very foods.
The junk food and sugar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The stuff that makes the insulin resistance worse. So you can see how it can become this vicious cycle, right? Diet,
Yeah.
stress, sleep, feeding into each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Then they introduce what they frame as one other big cause, something they really emphasize that they feel doesn't get enough attention.
Okay, what's the big one?
Seed oils.
Seed oils, right. This is where their perspective gets really specific, isn't it?
Very specific and potentially quite controversial for some. They start by acknowledging, look, omega-6 fatty acids, which are high in a lot of common seed oils like soybean, corn, canola, sunflower, they are essential nutrients.
Yeah.
We need some.
Okay,
But they immediately pivot to the problem, as they see it, of oxidation. They argue that many studies looking at these oils don't properly consider how easily they get damaged.
David Shaw.
They describe these particular omega-6 oils as being inherently unstable, like chemically fragile, very vulnerable to damage from oxygen, from heat, from light. Which leads them to ask this question. If these oils are so delicate, how come you see huge bottles of industrial seed oil sitting on supermarket shelves for months, maybe even a year or more, unrefrigerated?
Good question. How do they last?
Well, their explanation points straight at the processing. They say these oils are highly processed, using really high heat and various chemicals.
Chemicals, that's like.
They specifically call out hexane. And they make sure to mention that hexane is also a component of gasoline, sort of to highlight just how industrial and, well, harsh this processing is.
Wow. Okay, so they're heavily processed. What's the impact of consuming them, according to the source?
This is the key part of their argument here.
Yeah.
They claim that these altered, damaged fats from the processed seed oils, they essentially get stuck inside your cells for a really long time.
How long are we talking?
They actually put a number on it. They suggest it could be something like a year and a half.
A year and a half?
Seriously.
For something you ate to be affecting your cells.
That's the claim. And according to their argument, this long-term presence, this buildup within the cell membranes, they present it as a major factor that directly damages the insulin receptor itself, right there on the surface of the cell.
So they're linking the consumption of these oils directly to the mechanism of insulin resistance at the cellular level.
Directly. They're saying this is a fundamental driver of why your cells stop responding properly to insulin.
And to put that into context, did they say how much of this stuff people are typically eating?
Yeah, they threw out a pretty startling statistic. They estimate that the average person might be getting Literally 25% to 30% of their total daily calories from these processed seed oils.
25 to 30%, that's huge. A quarter to nearly a third of everything you eat.
It really puts the potential scale of exposure into perspective, especially when you combine it with their claim about the cellular damage.
Okay, so this leads them to a pretty significant point about diets, doesn't it? Like low-carb or keto diets.
It does. They suggest that just cutting carbs, going keto, it might not be enough. It might not fully fix the inflammation or the heart problems or the insulin resistance if you're still consuming a lot of these seed oils.
So a low-carb diet isn't automatically healthy in their view if it includes lots of seed oils.
Right. They draw a contrast. They talk about a healthy version of low carb or keto, one that deliberately avoids seed oils and instead uses fats they consider more stable and healthier, like butter, tallow, coconut oil, olive oil.
And that applies to cooking fats, but also things like salad dressings.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Salad dressings, mayonnaises, sauces.
Mhm.
Those are often hidden major sources of seed oils if you're not checking labels carefully.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up their view on the root cause then. It comes back to that fat around the heart, the epicardial fat.
Yep, which they believe is mainly caused by that combination of sugar and starches,
Mm-hmm.
but with a really strong emphasis, a definite emphasis on the role of these processed seed oils as well.
And when you think about it, sugar, refined starches, processed seed oils, that combination sounds a lot like...
Ultra-processed foods, basically.
Yeah.
So their root cause analysis ends up pointing a very strong finger at these highly manufactured, ubiquitous items in the modern diet.
It's quite a detailed chain they lay out, starting from what a surgeon actually sees in the chest cavity and tracing it all the way back to specific ingredients, especially those oils, and how they might be affecting our cells.
It really tries to connect that clinical observation directly to everyday food choices.
Now, okay, this might all sound a bit daunting, maybe even a bit bleak. But the good news, according to the source, is that they believe there are really quick things you can do to start tackling this, to try and reduce that specific fat around the heart.
Right, they definitely shift to actionable advice based on their model.
Yeah.
Step one, maybe the most direct thing based on their argument. Get rid of the seed oils, cut them out.
And replace them with.
Replace them with those healthier fats they mentioned. Butter, tallow, coconut oil, real olive oil, those kinds of things.
Okay, ditch the seed oils. What's action number 2?
Go on a low-carb, low-starch diet, basically what many people know as a ketogenic diet, focusing on real, whole foods, keep the sugars and starches down. And they mentioned something kind of interesting about the fat itself, that epicardial fat. They describe its color as being sort of beige.
Beige, not white or brown.
Yeah, kind of in between. And the important point they make is that because it's sort of like brown fat, it responds really well to things that stimulate brown fat activity.
Okay. Which leads to one of their more, let's say, unusual recommendations.
Cold therapy, yeah. They suggest things like taking cold showers or maybe using cold plunge tanks if you have access.
Really? Cold showers to fight heart fat?
They present it as a really good method, even say it's potentially one of the fastest ways to drop your insulin. The idea is that the cold stress kind of jolts your body and improves your metabolic response.
Okay, what's the logic there? How does being cold help?
Well, their thinking is the problem was created by having high insulin all the time, right?
Right. Chronic high insulin driving fat storage.
So if you actively do things to lower your insulin, and importantly, not spike it by eating constantly, you can flip that switch pretty quickly. Yeah. Turn your body towards fat burning instead of fat storing. The cold exposure is presented as one way to help trigger that shift.
Yeah, it makes sense. And not eating constantly. That ties right into their next big recommendation, doesn't it? Intermittent fasting.
Exactly. Big emphasis on this. Based on their whole model, the specific approach they suggest is aiming for just 2 meals a day.
2 meals, and they were specific about when, weren't they?
Very specific. First meal around lunchtime, second meal at dinner time.
Lunch and dinner, got it.
And then they added this absolutely critical rule,
Right.
like non-negotiable in their view.
Which is?
Absolutely positively no snacks.
No snacks at all. Wow, why are they so adamant about that?
They are incredibly firm on this point. The source basically says snacking destroys the ability to get rid of this fat.
Destroys it, strong words.
Yeah. In their framework, constant grazing, even on supposedly healthy things, keeps bumping up your insulin all day long. They call it the worst habit you can do if your goal is to tackle this epicardial fat and the underlying insulin resistance. It just never gives your body a chance to get into that fat-burning, low-insulin state between meals.
Okay, so clear eating windows, no snacks between. Makes sense that the goal is managing insulin. What about exercise? Is that part of the plan?
Definitely. Exercise is in there. But, and this is key, they stress that the type of exercise really matters if you're specifically targeting insulin sensitivity.
Okay, so not just any workout. What do they recommend?
They specifically point to high-intensity interval training, HIIT.
Right, the short bursts of intense effort.
Exactly. And they make a pretty bold claim about it. They say that just one bout of proper HIIT can make your insulin receptors significantly more sensitive, like almost immediately.
One session. That's impressive if true. How does that compare to other types of exercise, like jogging?
Well, they actually contrast it with moderate intensity stuff, like going for a long run or jog. They suggest that while that kind of exercise has its own benefits, for this specific goal, improving insulin sensitivity quickly, it might be less effective.
Why less effective?
Their reasoning in the source is that longer duration, moderate exercise can sometimes lead to a significant cortisol spike. And high cortisol, the stress hormone, can kind of interfere with your metabolic goals, according to their model.
Ah, okay. So for this purpose, they favor the short, sharp shock of HIIT over the longer, slower burn.
That seems to be the takeaway, yeah. Focus on intensity over duration for insulin sensitivity.
Got it. Did they mention anything else? Any other little helpers?
Yeah, just briefly, they tacked on two other things they said might help speed the process up a bit.
Okay.
One was using apple cider vinegar. They suggested maybe putting a tablespoon in a glass of water and having that a few times a day.
Apple cider vinegar, okay. And the other?
The supplement Berberine. They mentioned that as something else that could potentially give things a boost.
Okay, berberine.
So yeah, if you put it all together, it's about changing the diet, getting rid of seed oils, lowering carbs and sugar. It's about timing the 2 meals, no snacks, using stimuli like cold exposure,
Well,
specific exercise like HIIT, and then maybe adding vinegar or berberine. That's their comprehensive plan.
right. So looking back at this whole source, it really does present this quite tightly woven picture, doesn't it? It starts with fat around the heart,
Epicardial fat.
links it firmly to insulin resistance,
Mhm.
and then points the finger at specific causes, sugar, starches, but especially those processed seed oils and the habit of frequent eating or snacking.
Yeah, and then it flips right into a multi-step plan designed to reverse that exact mechanism. It's focused on removing the alleged causes, managing insulin levels very deliberately, and then using these other tools, cold, HIIT, maybe supplements, to kind of accelerate the turnaround.
It definitely connects the dots from that very specific thing a surgeon sees all the way back to choices you make in your kitchen in your daily routine.
It's certainly a fascinating perspective, bringing together that clinical insight with nutritional theory presented in the source material.
It really is. And it leaves you, the listener, with a pretty interesting thought to chew on, doesn't it? You know, we get so much general advice about heart health, eat less fat overall, exercise more generally. But this source gets incredibly specific. It's about where the fat is located right on the heart. Why it's there, driven by insulin resistance, fueled by specific things like seed oils and snacking, and how to target it with quite specific methods like cold exposure, HIIT, and strict eating windows. So the question is, what does this kind of highly focused approach suggest? Does it hint at a deeper level of nuance in metabolic health and heart disease? Could focusing on these specific mechanisms rather than just broad strokes be a more effective path for prevention or even reversal for some people? It definitely challenges you to think more precisely about cause and effect when it comes to your own health.